All right, so Mr. Gerber here. So we are looking now at kind of combining aspects of chapters 16, 19, and 21. So looking at primarily Christianity within the Eastern and Western European realms, the increasing influence in Europe. That's chapter 20, not or sorry, chapter 19, and then a little bit of connection to the expanding horizons, particularly in terms of the bubonic plague and its effects. So that's kind of what these next few videos are going to be about. As we finally turn our attention towards Europe and the impacts that's going to have both short term and long term. So the first chapter or so is just kind of building up towards that 1250 timeline. But kind of the essentially what kind of happens as a result of the fall of the Roman Empire, why it collapses, and then kind of the ensuing short and long term changes that are associated with that as Europe slowly grows during the Middle Ages. And that'll take us into, or the medieval period, and that'll take us to when we come back from the end of trimester 1, when we begin to look at kind of the expanding horizons of chapters 21, 22, 23, when we start looking at European exploration and advances going into both Asia and also into the Americas. So, yeah. So here we got a map on this spot. Okay, that is the Roman Empire at its greatest extent. So as you can see, controlling almost all of Western Europe, Central Europe, and southeastern Europe. Not so much, into Germany. It's kind of where, like, if you follow the location of the Rhine River and then the Danube down here, is essentially as far as Rome got. It didn't really try to go too far past that with the Germanic tribes, but also obviously conquering Anatolia, or what is now modern-day Turkey, Palestine, into Iraq, down through Egypt, and then obviously through North Africa and up into Great Britain. So at one point, Rome became very, very powerful, and so much so that it became really, really hard to manage. And so while Roman roads made things very easy to move people, goods, trade, and make administration a lot easier, it was still a lot of time or a lot of difficulty to manage with bureaucratic systems to kind of control both sides or all of this empire, because there was so much territory to kind of hold on to it. So the Roman Emperor Constantine, who also was the first one to legalize Christianity and has the city of Constantinople named after him, split the empire into two, where he, in fact, actually, if you look at this map on this side, all right, I don't know if the video of me is covering it up there, but split it up to essentially make the Eastern Empire, which is going to be later on known as the Byzantine Empire, and then this is the Western Roman Empire that gets split again kind of around the year 300. And so over time, this side of the Roman Empire is going to collapse or just kind of slowly fall apart and then never really gain its status. But the Byzantine Empire is essentially going to last until about 1450. So kind of, again, that end of this time frame. So throughout rising empires within the Russian, the Kievan Rus Empire, the Abbasid and the Umayyad dynasties and caliphates down here in the Middle East and beyond. The Mongols kind of get spread through here. The Crusades happened during this time and through this area, and that consistently threatens and moves in. So yeah, so the Roman Empire is eventually split in two again, as we said, to easier to manage, but the Western Empire dissolves again due to poor administration, constant invasions, and internal conflicts. And so it's just kind of, it doesn't really collapse, it just kind of slowly dissolves over time. Rome itself is sacked a number of times and destroyed. And then it's just really slow to recover due to, again, constant power struggles within the empire from outside. So again, you have the Germanic tribes coming in from this end. You have the Vikings at certain points coming in. You have threats from the Islamic caliphates and threats coming in from the southern parts and, all the way through the Iberian Peninsula and Al-Andalus in Spain. So it really disrupts trade and safety, and Europe takes a long time to kind of recover and rebuild itself, hence kind of why what these videos are meant for, kind of talking about that rebuilding phase. The eastern side becomes as the Byzantine Empire here on that side, and lasts for about another 1,000 years, almost 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, and essentially considers itself to be kind of the relic, the remainder of Roman traditions for the next 1,000-odd years or so. So yeah, it leads to different cultures and developments between the regions, between Eastern and Western Europe. So they retain and hold on to Roman laws in what's known as the Justinian Code, and they codify a lot of the laws and actually hold on to them for a long period. And as we said, both face multiple Muslim invasions as a result, due to their location to the growing Islamic world, to their, in this case, with the Byzantines, to their east and to their south, and then with Western Europe, again, to their south and to their west. All right, so comparing the two, because they are very different, but also very similar in many aspects. So with the Byzantine side, or Byzantium, they have a very strong government. They actually end up having the remnants of the Roman Empire and emperors inside of their seat here in Constantinople, what is now modern day Istanbul. And they also have a very strong army related to the theme system. That is something that you want to look at more in depth in the book. But also they are very close to the Silk Road and the Silk Road trades due to their location here on the Mediterranean, and having extension and power initially at least into the Middle East, and then being able to continually trade throughout. They are the wealthier side. They have the larger urban centers because, again, of their safety and increasing trade, as well as stable and abundant food sources. Okay, the peasants own land due to the theme system, like we said. Look that up more in the book. And the increasing food leads to, again, more manufacturing in silk, gems, and glassware. And obviously, again, urban centers increase money from trading and taxes from increasing trade. So they continue to hold on. Again, as we said, it will slowly decay over time, with Byzantium slowly falling by the wayside. In Western Europe, okay, due to that constant warfare and invasions and the geographic barriers inside of them, Western Europe is eventually divided into smaller kingdoms that we now know of today. Think of like France, Spain, England, with a lot of other states being even harder to control. So like Spain, is well divided because, you have the, Mediterranean Sea here, but also the Pyrenees Mountains separates it primarily from France. Italy has the Alps on this border, and then, the Rhine, or not the Rhine. Yeah, not the Rhine River. But you have mountains over here, like with the Alps, and then there are other platforms that separate France and Germany. So again, kind of easier ways to make it subdivided and not easy to bring together. Not that other people didn't try. People like the Carolingians tried from time to time, and a lot of other groups tried to unite other parts of it, like the Holy Roman Empire will take hold a little bit in Western Europe, but it's never really one united group or organization. It's a lot of municipalities, city-states, especially within that central part of Germany. All right, and over time, there will be monarchies that take over. But yeah, so over time, heavy plows with iron tips iron tips that dig into the ground, and also the addition of the horse collar make it a lot easier for Europeans, especially in the Western art where it's more damp, to increase their agricultural production. But again, there's limited trade opportunities beyond the local markets and those with sea access. So again, unless you're located along these sea routes, in the Baltic and in the North Sea and the Mediterranean, there's not many whole lot of people you can sell to that aren't producing the exact same products or similar products that you are making. So that leads to a lack of a lot of stable, large urban centers. So not really a whole lot of big cities or towns within that. So not a whole lot of economic diversity either, because again, there's not a whole lot of trade or things that they're producing that are unique beyond, or within an area, there's not a whole lot of unique manufacturing or production. So now, also over time, we get a split between the Christian Church, the first of several splits between what is now what we consider to be the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. The later splits will also happen within the Catholic Church too. So this is an official split in 1054. So the biggest differences is, within their leadership, their iconography, at least part-time, and the idea of the clergy. So Eastern Orthodox, priests are allowed to marry. In the Catholic Church, priests are not allowed to marry. Within the leadership, the Catholic Church, the Pope is the supreme authority. Within the Eastern Orthodox, Pope is not supreme, allows for local leaders to have more say. And initially, there's that Caesar Popism that's mentioned in the book that talks about essentially the head of the Byzantine Empire also being kind of the religious figurehead too. But that is something that the Roman Catholics have kind of walked away from. And for a time, there was an issue differencing between icons. Icons being, paintings or sculptures or, statues of religious people or symbols. Many in the church feared that followers would worship the icons rather than, God, and wanted the icons destroyed. But Catholics realized that, many people are not literate. This is not as much of a big problem in the Eastern Orthodox Church. More people were literate in the Byzantine Empire than they were in the Catholic side, in the Western half. So it made sense that they didn't necessarily need icons. And so the Roman Catholics said, icons are fine, even though it does say in one of the commandments, thou shalt not make a graven image. But this allowed people to visualize and understand and pray towards someone or something, even though they couldn't necessarily read the Bible, which was very limited, especially, again, after that fall of the Roman Empire, where literacy rates and prosperity kind of go down. So eventually, the Eastern Orthodox give up on that, and that changes. Some similarities between both of them. All right, obviously there's still the ultimate belief in Jesus Christ, but there are some other big differences there, or some other big similarities. So they all have churches, monasteries, convents that offer social services, things like confession, mass, medical services, so like little hospitals, inns, places for people to stay. Many of them have orphanages and offer education. Occasional libraries and study for religious purposes, but also holding on to other types of manuscripts that refer to philosophy, astronomy, religion, mathematics, things that, big things from the leftovers of the Catholic or from the Greek and Roman times that get held on to and actually kind of get stowed away for several centuries and maybe not necessarily learned about. Both churches send out missionaries to spread Christianity by offering salvation through Christ. So most of Europe is actually Christian by the year 1000. So even though it did initially get spread essentially throughout the entirety of what was the Roman empires, it never really expanded beyond that initially. And so both churches begin to spread the message beyond North Africa, not a whole lot below there, but primarily again through up through England, up into Scandinavia, Germany, and into Russia. Particularly, that is kind of where the Orthodox Church really spreads, is going into Russia, and they actually form the Cyrillic language that is used by the Slavic people. So people that are living in like Romania, in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, actually legitimizing and actually giving birth to a written language for them. So that's actually kind of cool. Russian is also a part of that too. Kind of breaking into more of the specific things about Western Europe. So in Western Europe, you have the feudal system, or feudalism, also known as the estate system, that essentially is kind of a breakdown of social class, but also, that's the part. The manor system has to do with economics, and that's on the next page. So at the very top, you have the king, considered to be, connected to God, and that's something that's going to be expanded on later. The first estate is religion. The second estate is kind of the nobles, or are the nobles or the knights that fight for a king. And then the third estate is everybody else who's kind of essentially poor farmers or peasants that farm the land. How that works over here is that the king gives land to the nobles and to the church. The church owns some land too, but the king gives land to the nobles. They give it to knights and vassals and they will give military service, and then in turn, they'll give land and protection to the peasants, who will provide them with, you can kind of see this kind of thing, of giving it over to food services, and then it's kind of an exchange of things based on your social class. So, one level gets this, the other level gets this, and in return they get this kind of stuff. Rulers and kings typically share power within the Catholic or with the Catholic Church, and then there's sometimes conflicts and issues with the church and other groups. So again, that's a more thing to look at in the textbook. So the manor system is the economic side of that. So when we talk about feudalism, what are the peasants providing? What are the knights providing? Where are they living? Who's getting protection and where? The manor system helps to explain that a little more. So manors are large farming estates that produce everything that is needed to survive, because they're very independent and self-sufficient, because again, we are talking about this is after the fall of the Roman Empire, and again, not a whole lot of trade, so you don't want to rely on trading goods from other places. You want to be able to produce enough to support your peoples. So food, clothing, shelter. All right, so the system, the lord and the peasants share the land of the manor, shown here. Okay, the lord has 1/3 of the land. Okay, the peasants, also known as serfs or serfdom, which is essentially like one step above slavery. They're tied to the land, essentially. They farm 2/3 of the land for themselves. All right, and in return, they give a lot of the crops back to the lord in kind of a return of that exchange. So again, you might think about this in terms of in the case, you can think of indentured servitude. You can think of this again as an idea of sharecropping. And so, they farm the lord's 1/3 of the land as well. And then they also pay taxes, and they can't leave the land without permission. So we are going to stop here with the benefits of expanded agriculture, because that's going to connect in with the next video. So if you got questions, as always, let me know.